Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Today's Helpline training is going to be on canine behavior, and myself and Laura Lasdow. Laura has been with the Animal Rescue League for many years, but also helping on the Helpline. So it's been sort of a tag team with Marna and with Laura. Laura's been sort of doing most, or pretty much, right, most of the canine behavior stuff.
I think so, yep.
So Laura is going to be the person that you guys will sort of fall back on if you do have questions, excuse me, and myself, of course, in regards to canine, very similar to, Denise being for smallies and then Marna being for cats. Just so you have somebody to bounce questions off of, and of course the whole team. So we will continue to be a group team effort when we go forward and go out live for the new revamping of the Helpline. Okay, so without further ado, so canine behavior. I just, of course, couple things. First, rules of thumb is going to be that we want to always rule out medical first. So as we said in a couple of the other sessions, that medical issues with animals definitely tend to affect the animal's behavior first, and then you may see that there's a medical issue later. So if one of the behaviors that people are calling about all of a sudden come up suddenly, if you will, the first, or in any event, you want to at least say, has your dog been to the vet recently, and have you sort of ruled out medical for this issue? Any aggression noted, feel free to take the information down, so be a message taker, and then empathize with them, letting them know that we're all here for them, but please do not give any advice and send it along to myself and also to Laura, and we'll sort of either take care of it or farm it out from there. The other thing I really wanted to, which I did not put on this, and I should have, shame on me, I want you guys to know for sure that we have dog training classes. So we offer, and definitely make a list of these, we offer group classes. We offer, which is about 7 or 8 dogs per class, and it's the basic training. There are definitely some advanced training options, dog training options, and we also offer semi-private classes. And the reason we do the semi-private classes, and you'll sort of have an idea of why we will do that as we move further in the training, but mostly because what ends up happening is that some of the dogs that are showing behavioral issues cannot be in a class with a group of other 7 or 8 or 6 other dogs. So we want to give them the option to do something a little bit smaller. So yes, the cost is a little higher, but they will get a little bit more personal attention when it comes to a smaller group class. And then we also, so those are semi-privates, it's 3 dogs or less. And we go through anything as far as basic behavior, or we can focus on specific issues they may be having. The other option for dog training classes is we offer private lessons. So those private lessons are in-house, so it's either at our Dedham location or Boston location, and we can work on any issue at all that anyone is having with their dog. So they can, have one-on-one attention. It's an hour and a half long, and they can work on any problem that they're having with a certified trainer and their dog. Sorry, another housekeeping. Can everyone see my presentation? So I just want to make sure. Laura, can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can. That's okay. It's building up my screen totally.
Great. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Kristen. Great. Okay. So I will, when I send out this PowerPoint, I will also put a bullet in there for dog training and then the options available. So that's something that's really, really important. We want to be able to be the first line of defense for people if they're calling into the helpline. We want to be able to offer any in-house dog training first, and then if they're really looking for outside help for in-home, we can just forward, recommend from there. So if we're not able to offer the service, we can then recommend after that. So you're basically going to help with the issue as best you can, offer the dog training group classes, semi-privates, or private lessons. And if that still isn't helping, for example, if they need to see a veterinary behaviorist or something along those lines, that would then come through myself and Laura, and we would then farm it out from there. Okay, so here we are at week 3. I can't believe we're already here. This is great and exciting. We do have one more left. So week 3, this is not going to be, we're not going to talk about these issues in this particular order, but what we will talk about tonight is separation anxiety in dogs, play aggression in dogs, destruction, disobedience, talk a little bit about that, the fearful dog, and house oiling and barking. Laura and I talked last week and we went over a lot of what I really want to know from her is what are the most common behavior issues that she's getting calls about, and a couple of them, most of them were on this list, I think, right, Laura?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, great. So we'll continue on, and if there's something I'm missing or if you guys have any other questions, again, feel free to write in the chat area or just unmute yourself. Go ahead and ask your question, and definitely feel free to interrupt me. And also, Laura, anything you have to add or take away, feel free.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll be honest, the reason why it's out of order in a way is because it was sort of already done for me, so I left it as is, but we'll start with the introduction of your dog to cats or even other animals. So you want to think about it. Dogs are pretty easy. Well, I use that term loosely. Dogs are fairly easy to confine and contain. You want to give cats the freedom to be able to do what they need to do. It's a little bit harder to contain them. However, so the use of baby gates is really, really important when we're introducing a dog to a cat. They even make those particular gates, the ones that will tighten to or even, go right into the wall, the gates that have a little door, if you've ever seen them, on the very bottom. It's a little mini cat door, but the gate itself will hold a dog back, depending on the size, of course. So you definitely want to use baby gates to your advantage when you're introducing. Practicing obedience, and that just means, I don't mean, you're going to go into your full-on, your dog has to be 100% obedient. It just means that you're going to use whatever your dog knows, and along with treats, and keep them on leash to be able to control them and confine them when you're doing this meeting. So your dog is on leash, sitting if possible, distracting them with food, and your cat is across the room if they're brave enough to come through. And if you have somebody else, you can always feed the cat treats too if they're interested in feeding or if they're interested in food. You'll keep the meetings short, and you can move closer and increase the amount of time. And provided there is no aggression, or if the dog is so excitable that it's scaring the cat, you want to avoid longer meets. But if everyone seems to be calm and they're not really paying full attention to each other, you can proceed. But the idea is really managing the situation. So when you're giving advice over the helpline, what you want to be able to do is make sure that, first of all, what their setup is. So you might spend a little bit of time trying to figure out in your head what the room looks like as they describe it. And always err on the side of caution, keeping everybody separated and safe.
And could I add something?
Yes.
And I think one thing that needs to be emphasized is people expect quick results. They expect things to happen on their timetable when they need to be reminded, I guess, that it's on the animal's timetable, and that slower is generally better.
Yes, that's a really, really, really good point. Yeah, everybody's so quick to move forward when in all actuality, it's not them that's making the decision whether it's going well, it's actually the animals.
Right.
So that's a really good point. So safety first, utilizing your gates, and then also really working at each animal's time frame, not the person's time frame. Okay, now, Laura, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing or hearing from people. Is it usually that they have a resident dog and they've adopted a new dog, or they've gotten a puppy, or?
It's actually a combination of calls. New puppy and, adult dog introducing either or to resident dog.
Okay. Okay. Now, a lot of the shelters out there, and maybe even rescues, I'm not really sure, they will require that the resident dog come in to the shelter or foster home. I'm not sure how foster homes work, but in any event, they will require that the resident dog come into the shelter to meet this new dog if they're adopting. If they're buying from a breeder, typically that's not the case. So they're bringing a new puppy in to their home without their resident dog knowing what's actually happening. So if they're doing it where the resident dog does not know that the dog is coming, then they'll want to set up their home in such a way that there is a space for the new dog to be in, where they have to realize, first of all, that both dogs are not going to be meeting each other and playing the minute that the new dog walks in the door. I think erring on the side of caution, and even if your dog is, or the resident dog is the friendliest dog that you've ever met, that meets other dogs and is totally fine, I still think that it's really important to err on the side of caution and have a space away from each other in their home in order to do the introduction properly. Does that sound about right, Laura?
Right. And like the first thing on the slide here, neutral location on leash, I think that's really key. Meeting at the local basketball court or the local park, someplace that the resident dog isn't all that familiar with.
Oh, that's, yeah.
And doing, parallel walking and circling and all that kind of stuff, and then slowly closing the distance and watching body language. That's just such a big thing, and taking it slow. Like, again, it's just taking it slow, not rushing things, not forcing the dogs to interact when they are not ready.
Yeah. So I have a story because I can say that this has happened a lot. Just recently we had a long-term dog here I'm in Dedham today. We had a long-term dog in Dedham going to live with I would say, grandmother of another dog that had been adopted from us a year or so ago. The son had adopted the dog that was here a year ago, but visits the woman that was adopting this current dog a lot. So they needed them to at least be able to coexist with each other. And we had the resident dog. So I'm calling the resident dog, the one that comes to visit all the time. Okay, so the resident dog came back to the shelter, hadn't been here in about a year and a half. And the shelter's such a distracting environment for dogs, let alone dogs that have been here before. So he came in and he was definitely distracted and not really caring about what was going on except sniffing everything in sight. And so I did a meeting with the dog that they were adopting, the new dog. And it didn't go horrible, but it also did not go great. We were able to walk down the street. We were able to do parallel walking and go for a walk together. But the minute they started interacting with each other, they would jump up and bark at each other, but it didn't go any further than that. But it was enough for me to say, okay, they're certainly not going to start playing and running around with each other today. So it was a little bit of a foreign environment, but it still was that neutral location, and it was on leash. I was completely and utterly involved with the whole thing. And because the resident dog did not live at the woman's home that was adopting the new dog, I felt comfortable sending her home. And so we did. And my one rule, so to speak. Hi, Denise. Thank you for joining us. So my one rule, so to speak, was that I asked them not to do a dog meet until this particular this particular newly adopted dog had time, at least a couple of weeks, to acclimate to the new home, right? So when a dog goes into a new home, any pet, they need time to acclimate to their new environment. So that was the only thing I asked. Okay. So of course, as we move forward, one of the staff members here had called to see how things were going, and immediately right out of the gate, the owner of the new dog said, "Oh, but the meeting with so-and-so resident dog did not go as well." So of course, here's the example. That is the example of what Laura was just saying about pushing it and doing it too fast because the people want to know way more than the actual dogs want to know. So of course it didn't go well.
Right.
But they wanted to know sooner than later whether this was going to work. So human nature, right? So human nature says that we want to know if it's going to work way sooner than anybody else in the universe does. So I can say that the good news is that nothing bad happened. And also the good news is they're just keeping them separated and it's no big deal. So it all worked out and everything was great. But I think to the point that Laura had made about, we want to make sure this is done on the animal's time frame, not on the humans. Does that make sense? Sounds about sort of what you were saying, Laura.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does. And then back to what you had were saying about actually in the home and making sure that the new dog that's coming in has their own place, own space, whether it's the spare bedroom or, a corner in a room with a gate or an X-pen and their own crate, just so they can get away and be separate from the resident dog and have time to decompress without the resident dog in their face type of thing.
Yes. So it's very, very important too that the resident dog still has their own space and their own time and their own, area that they're completely used to. Right. But the new dog may be a little bit disturbed, has to stay in one room for a little while, has to stay away from the common areas for a little while, just again to adjust. It's also, it's going to be an adjustment for both dogs. So that's really important.
Right.
So hopefully that takes care of that. But again, any questions, just feel free. All right. So we're totally switching gears and we're going to talk about the fearful dog. There has been a new trend, I would say within the past 5 to 8 years, maybe a little bit longer, but at least the past 5 years or so, you've been hearing a lot about dogs being transported from the South to New England. And the reason that happens is because New England has been so wonderful and they have been so accommodating or following all the rules, if you will, for spay-neuter rules and licensing their dogs and keeping their dogs inside and doing everything they're supposed to do. So you're not seeing the stray dogs that used to exist way back when on the street anymore. They're all the dogs are spayed and neutered, confined, and there's just not any strays around as much. So what happened was there is still that issue in the southern states because it's warmer and dogs definitely can stay and live outside comfortably and happily. And it's still a misnomer there in the South too, where the bigger dogs tend to always live outside, and that's just how it is. So because of the overpopulation and the spay-neuter rules have not made it that far as of yet, we're seeing an influx of these dogs getting transported because in New England, people are still looking to adopt dogs. With that being said, however, what happens is these particular dogs from the South are used to a different environment, which is they live outside, they have free time, they don't get leashed and confined, they're not walked typically, they're, just they sort of roam, or they live in a backyard somewhere, which is, again, completely fine, and that's what they've been used to. So now what happens is we pluck them out of that particular situation and bring them up to here, the big bad New England, and they've now have to get comfortable with being on a leash and a collar, being indoors, just not having that freedom, which is the fight or flight response. We've now just limited them to the fight response. So one of the things that Laura had mentioned when we were talking about the most popular calls is that she's getting a lot of calls from people that have adopted from the South, and their dogs are extremely fearful and or aggressive. That sounds right, Laura?
It's more fearful, I want to say.
Okay, yeah. Good. So the fearful body language will be that they will be, cowering, moving away from people, staying away from people, not being as friendly and outgoing as they, as any other dog might be, just because, again, they're just getting used to the new environment. It is all treated the same, however. So we will use what is called desensitization and counter conditioning, which means that we want to show them that, yes, you may be fearful of some stimulus that's here, that's new, that you may have never experienced, but we want you to know that no matter what, if you're fearful of it, we're going to just completely and utterly give you lots and lots and lots of food, because food ultimately is the way to a dog's heart. Dogs work for food, we work for money. And so we're going to pair that stimulus that you may be afraid of with something delicious and something you never get unless you're in the environment of that stimulus. So therefore, we use our old adage, counter conditioning. So when they see that stimulus and they get something really delicious and nothing bad happens, slowly but surely they realize, oh, well, I have nothing to be afraid of. So ultimately, that's the treatment that or the advice that you're going to be giving, is just simply knowing that if your dog is fearful of something and showing fearful behavior, that's going to trigger you to then now tell them that why food is so important, and also just making sure that they're getting the food when the stimulus is scaring them, I guess. Did you want to add anything, Laura?
Yeah, and making sure that that if the dog is not taking the food, the bit of chicken or the bit of hot dog, then they're too close to whatever is frightening the dog. They need to move away.
Yes, distance.
Distance is their friend.
Yes. And that's important too, because people think like, oh, well, he was friendly, yesterday, but then today he's not. And what you want to do is, the two things that you want to do is use the food, but then also distance is also creating, how do I say this? We want to desensitize them to the environment by using the food, but also letting them know that if they're fearful and they're not eating, we'll go back to a place far enough away that they then will feel more comfortable to eat the food and nothing bad happens. I don't know if I jumbled that up a little bit, but if you will, the distance increasing will help them realize that they can just, even though they're on leash or confined or contained, they can still create distance away from what they're afraid of. I think that makes a little more sense. Okay, so desensitization, counter conditioning, if mild, have the owner feed delicious food treats in the presence of the stimulus, or move away. If it's more severe, definitely forward them to me. Now, what are we calling aggression? Aggression can be anywhere from the barking and lunging, so to speak, all the way out to growling and or attempting to bite or biting. Those would probably be your aggression behaviors that you would be looking for in the phone call, or you could even ask the question. Is your dog exhibiting any of the following behaviors? And if the answer is yes, then you'll take the message again, like take the information down, empathize with them, but definitely, forward it to myself and Laura. Okay. Again, all over the lot here, but okay. So house training in dogs. So Laura, did you say this was one of the things that you get questions about?
Yes, definitely. New puppies and sometimes newly adopted older dogs who are just not used to their new home yet. So a combination again.
Yes. And again, it's the whole idea of, we're getting a lot of adopted dogs, which is great. But they might run into issues of, so if you'll notice, so these are the dogs having house training issues. So the new dogs and older puppies. And then we have the puppies. Okay, so we'll go back to the house training in dogs. Okay, so I'm a huge proponent for crating and confinement. But before I move on, Laura, just generally, what do you typically tell people?
With a puppy, let's see,
Well, let's do the older dog first.
Oh, okay. And this would go for a puppy too, to establish a routine.
Yes.
Which is, I think, a very important thing. And then at first that you take the dog out a little more often to do business. And then as the dog learns the routine, that helps with the whole, house training, knowing what to expect.
Right. So when you're taking calls about house training, however, this can be really, really frustrating for people. And you might, in general, of all the calls that you take, but particularly with these ones, because it is kind of frustrating, one thing that you want to be sure of, and just I want you guys to know this, is that nothing is innate in dogs. So that means that they're not going to just all of a sudden realize, oh, I'm supposed to do that. So what you get a lot of is he's just not getting it. And they get so frustrated that they're just not getting it that it ends up that you're going to get a lot of, I tried that, I did that, I tried that, I did that. And that's a little challenging for callers. It's challenging for me as a dog trainer. But again, the idea is that you want to stick with the bottom line is what goes in must come out. So the reason they're feeling so out of control is because, again, they're going out 15 times and they're still having accidents. So there's twofold. The first one is if you need to measure input output. So that means that you need to know when you're feeding and when they're drinking in order to know when they're actually going to eliminate. And this may create some accidents. So I want to establish a really good routine by having it in writing on a piece of paper, and you are writing down every single time the dog will go to the bathroom, even if it's an accident inside. Because then you have an idea, okay, he ate at this particular time, and then he had an accident while I was washing the dishes, and it was at this particular time. Okay, so the next time he eats, you have a general idea of when that elimination might happen. And this goes for puppies and older dogs, okay? Also, water. So water is really hard to measure because if you have another dog or if you leave the water bowl down, you literally never know when the actual dog is taking a drink and then has to eliminate. Remember, we're going back to the basics, which is what goes in must come out. So even though people get a little bit weird about it, I will say when you're really trying to get a good routine down, I will say to offer water a few times a day after the following times. During mealtime, if they have a heavy play session with another dog or with you, and if it's really warm out and they've just come back from a walk. That's it. You're not leaving a water bowl down so that they can take it whenever they want, because then you'll have zero control. But if you're able to give them water during those times, then you'll have way more control. And to keep literally a piece of paper and a pen so that you write down every single time. That is really, really important to go back to those basics, because then you'll feel like, or the person will feel like they have some element of control. And then they'll also won't feel like they miss something or they have to go out, wait every 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But let's go back to getting into crating and confinement. So obviously they have to acclimate to the crate. They can feed in the crate, that sort of thing. Once the dog has been comfortably in the crate, and usually dogs acclimate pretty easily to sleeping in the crate at night because they're tired. They will go right to sleep. So that's usually the case. But that being said, that doesn't really count for house training. So the dog might actually be, all night long, sleep totally fine, and then the people think, oh, he's house trained. He made it through the night. It actually does not count because he's sleeping. When the dog is awake, it's a completely different story. So even though your dog might be okay for crating and confinement in the night, you still have to do this particular training during the day. So that's that. So let's say your dog is completely crate trained, and in the morning, you go to take the dog out, and what ends up happening is the dog gets really distracted by what's outside. Then all of a sudden, just like anybody that gets distracted, they lose the feeling of having to go to the bathroom, and because they're so excited, they get distracted. And then they get back inside and they're like, oh, right, I forgot I have to go to the bathroom. And so then they go. So that's where you get a lot of that. But I was out there for I talked to somebody yesterday that said they were outside for 4 hours waiting for the dog to poop. Again, going back to basics, trying to establish some sort of a solid schedule and routine. Okay. The same rules apply for a new puppy or a new dog. Take them to the same place every time to eliminate. Give a delicious treat when the elimination happens. Some people will say, oh, well, I gave a treat when we came back inside. Dogs are very literal and they are very precise. So if you're giving a treat for them eliminating on the grass outside, but you're giving it when they go back inside, they're literally feeling like you gave them the treat for just coming back inside. So you have to give the treat when they actually eliminate outside on the grass or wherever.
Yep, right after they finish, not during.
Right. Oh, that's a real.
Because they'll stop in the middle of going and not empty their bladder, say. Yeah.
That's a really good point too, because if they go and you get so excited that they're going outside, and then you start to fiddle around with your treat bag or your plastic bag that you have your treats in, they're going to get totally distracted. So you're very quiet. After the elimination happens, then you start praising and treating and all of that. Also, if you walk your dog, which most people do, you'd want to go to that particular spot first, wait for the elimination to happen, they get their treat, and then they get double reward because then they get to go for the walk. Okay. If no elimination after 5 to 10 minutes, go back inside and try again in 1 hour or so. Again, you'll have a much better idea, way much better idea if they've got a solid schedule. Do not let your dog out of sight indoors because they'll just run to the carpet and go to the bathroom. If they wander away, they can just go to the bathroom wherever. So you definitely want to keep an eye on them or put them back in their crate. Okay. Definitely do not punish or reprimand, specifically because what happens is, again, they're very literal. So they do not understand. If you have not established a solid schedule and you haven't followed the protocols or whatever, and they go to the bathroom inside by accident, which is always an accident, and then you start to punish them or get grouchy with them or get mad at them, what they think they're getting punished for is going to the bathroom in front of you, not in the house, but they're thinking they're getting punished for going to the bathroom in front of you. So what's going to happen? They're going to now start hiding, and or when you're outside on leash with them, they're going to remember that they're not supposed to go to the bathroom in front of you. So then you've completely eliminated the idea of them going to the bathroom while they're on leash with you. So that's a big no-no. So if they have an accident, just say, oops, and head outside. Literally bring them outside after they've gone to the bathroom inside. If you don't catch them in the act, then it's, just clean it up and move on, write it down, because it might have happened during this particular time. So it happened anytime within the past 15 minutes, so to speak. Write it down and move on. Okay. It begins to eliminate in home. Try to make a noise to stop. I didn't take that off, but I don't want you to do that. Ignore. That will be off when I send these to you. Okay. Just some extra stuff for puppies specifically. The 2 to 6 month range, they can't hold their urine for longer than 2 hours. If you need to be away, give them puppy pads, or have somebody come in and let them out. Confine them to an area. A pen is best, with a sleeping space, a playing area, and then a place to eliminate, and then continue to train outside. With the little dogs and the puppies, I definitely am all for paper training. The dogs always learn, no matter what, still to go outside. Laura, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so submissive urination is different. This is something that happens both in puppies and adult dogs, and this actually means that they're not able to control their bladders because of excitement or fear. So it's a physiological problem, not them having an accident because you didn't follow your schedule. Okay, so again, it happens in puppies and adults. It can occur when greeting happens, or if they're scolded, or if they're approached, and if they're shy. What you'd want to do, so I don't know if you get a lot of these calls, Laura, but
no, I don't know that I've ever gotten one for submissive urination. No.
Okay. They might say, like, I've gotten some people coming into class saying, oh, he pees every time somebody comes to the door and they're saying hello to him. It's literally something they can't help. It's just they get overly excited. I will say that sometimes it's one of those things that we could relate to if you laugh too much and, that sort of thing. That's kind of what physiologically is happening to their bodies. You kind of got where I was going with that, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you'd modify the greeting. So keep it a little low key. Tell them to do a different behavior. Definitely don't stare at them, and then reward them for paying attention to you versus paying attention to the other person. Don't stand over them, squat, approach from the side, pat under their head and under their chin instead of over their head. Those sort of things, just to make them a little bit more comfortable. Okay, now to barking. Okay, so barking, this is going between barking being an issue for a few different reasons. So why are they doing it? It could be because they don't want to be left alone. Barking in general, the way that dogs learn is that dogs will do what gets them what they want. So what that means is they will do anything that they've been practicing that gets them what they want. So let's talk about barking for a second. So let's say you're sitting at your computer and everything is super duper quiet. You're focusing, you're replying to an email or reading something. And then all of a sudden your dog barks at you and you stop what you're doing and you literally turn over and look at your dog and you say, stop, don't, quiet. Dogs will do what gets them what they want. And if everything's nice and quiet, they could get bored. And if they get bored, that means they're going to do what it takes to get them what they want, which is attention and to be played with or whatever they want, maybe even go outside. So that being said, we have to watch what we're doing first, which could then in turn help with a barking dog. So let's take that scenario again. So it's nice and quiet. I'm at my computer, I'm reading or I'm replying to an email, and it's nice and quiet. Quiet being the key word here, that I want to pay attention to the quiet. So I will then as the dog is quiet doing his own thing, I will definitely just interrupt myself, look over and say, good, quiet, nice job, and then come back over. So I might even be waking the dog to think, oh my gosh, they paid attention to me. Then you might elicit some barking after that. But regardless, I want the dog to mark the behavior of when I'm quiet, I get attention, as opposed to when I'm barking, they pay attention to me. Okay. So again, might be the dog that doesn't want to be left alone. The environment is boring. The young dog with an inability to exercise. So maybe it's a dog that has an injury that they need to be really quiet, so they're not able to exercise as much. Some solutions, again, the most important one in that particular scenario is to always, always, always start with rewarding the quiet and trying to ignore the barking. Walking the 2 to 3 times a day, not just for potty, playing games outside, fetch and frisbee, or inside, mental stimulation. So you want to prepare. So these people that are calling you with these issues, I'm very proactive versus being reactive. So again, I'm taking the scenario of me focusing. The dog is barking at me. I look over and say, quiet. I'm reacting to his barking. I want to be proactive. So I know for sure that I'm going to need to have 2 hours to finish this project, and I need my dog to be quiet, and I need to be able to focus. So I'm going to prepare for that and say, all right, in my head, he's getting his calm, and he will focus on that for the couple of hours, and then we can move on, and then we can go out and play, or we can go for a walk after that. So you want to be prepared with some of these things before we sit down to do anything that our dog needs to be quiet for, whether it be left alone or whether it be the environment is going to be a little boring. We want to make it a little bit more exciting. So the stuff calling, the busy toys, doggy daycare is always a good thing. The other side of that coin is that the dog is barking for territorial reasons. So if somebody comes to the doorbell's always a huge one. Or if there's people walking by the house, solutions could be teach a quiet command and, again, reward the quiet. For the territorial stuff, my first line of defense is going to be you want to practice avoidance. So if they're up on the couch looking out the window and barking every time a person comes home, please, 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 somebody answer the question, how would I avoid this? Or how would I make this so that if that's my issue, my dog is on the couch looking out the window and barking at every person that walks by, what is the first thing that I'm going to tell them to do? Please tell me. Anybody that's here. Laura?
Oh, okay. Sure. Move the couch away from the window. Close the blinds.
Thank you.
I hear that you can buy some like window coverings that say Home Depot and Lowe's, and I actually need to get those from my house. So the dog can't see out the window.
Thank you. So the first thing you're going to do is block the area off. And I cannot tell you how many people argue with me about that. Oh, I can't move the furniture. Oh, I can't this. Oh, I can't that. Oh my goodness. So yes, the first, again, we talk about being proactive versus reacting to the dog, okay? So here's how some of this stuff goes. We want to go back to our point of dogs will do what gets them what they want. So again, we go up and say, okay, they're bored, and now they've decided that every single time a person walks by, they're going to start barking. And then what? Then guess what? I get up, I tell them to quiet, I move them, I start, guess what I'm doing? I'm actually interacting with them, which is exactly what they wanted. Regardless of whether they're barking at the person or not, they still want our attention. So that being said, again, being proactive about it. Another big one that I get is, and just to my point about being proactive versus reactive, and also dogs will do what gets them what they want, the counter surfing. Counter surfing is a huge issue that you might hit when we're talking about these dogs. So hold on, Kristen, I'll get to you in 1 second. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the counter surfing. So with counter surfing, that's the same thing. Now, the first thing for counter surfing that happens is they're counter surfing and they're self-reinforced because typically they'll get something good, right? So they'll get a piece of whatever you're cooked, or they might get the loaf of bread, or they might get something. So what is that? They're getting rewarded for putting their paws up on the counter and running away with whatever they have. The other reason that dogs will do it, and you'll notice that some people might say, oh, every time I go to sit down and watch television in the evening, I sit down and all of a sudden my dog now starts going in the kitchen and jumping up on the countertops. Let's talk about this for a second. Okay, so now I'm totally ignoring my dog because I'm sitting and watching TV. I have not prepared him to be ready to be ignored. So now he wants your attention and he's on the counters and I hear him on the counters. So now when I hear him on the counters, I will stand up, go over, say, knock it off, get down, whatever we say, whatever it is we say. And what have we done? We've given them attention. Okay. So we want to be sure to check ourselves to know what it is that we're doing that is reinforcing the behavior that is annoying to us, if you will. All right. So Kristen, that makes so much sense. But in a city apartment environment, noise is more of a trigger than a sight. Is there a simplest solution for the noise? Yeah. So the other piece to that too is if they're hearing the noises and you can't predict, which usually happens in apartments, you're not able to predict what's actually happening or what's going to happen. Like somebody might be coming through the door and you don't know that they're coming through the door, and then that noise happens and they start barking. That's when you're going to use a quiet command. So you're going to say they can bark for half a second and then, all right, quiet or enough. And as soon as they stop barking, then you heavily reward with praise and treats so that they might be able to make a quick little bark, but then they have to stop. So that's when you really start to use that quiet command so they know what it means. Sometimes I've seen trainers giving a bark command in order to turn the barking off. So they will say, speak or bark or whatever, and then they'll say, okay, stop. And then they have an on and off switch. I've never seen that. Like, I know trainers do it and I know it works well. I've never done it personally. Laura, did you want to add anything to Kristen's comment?
Yeah, and if the dog is going to be left alone and they're barking at sounds in the apartment building, say, the owners could leave, say, the TV on or leave some music playing or a white noise machine, like you can typically see like at doctor's offices, little white noise machine to help the dog.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's really, really helpful because it just drowns out the noise.
Right.
I had another client telling me about their dog barking at every noise in the apartment and then having accidents in the crate. And so what was happening was they were getting really stressed by all the noises in the apartment. And then because they were up and stressed, it just made their having to go to the bathroom that much more, intense. So that was exactly what I had recommended, was either leave the television on, leave a radio on, enough to make it so that they won't hear every single noise every single minute.
Right.
Okay. The other reasons that they could be barking is the fearful, and again, desensitization and counter conditioning, and or avoid the areas that are being triggered. So if the dog starts barking at the person that's approaching them, you'll avoid and just walk away, even though it seems a little bit rude, but you just want to walk away. Again, when you have a dog that's fearful, the most important thing is keeping your dog safe, because if we force an interaction for any dog, but mostly for a fearful dog, it's never ever going to get better. It's only going to get worse. Also, that's why I'm very particular about the types of training that we use for all dogs, but specifically for fearful dogs, because remember, they have a fearful response for a reason. And if we start forcing them to be in the environment that they're afraid of, it really is only going to get worse and be way more stressful for the dog. So avoidance is a really, really, really important piece to that puzzle. Separation anxiety. So I did want to talk a little bit about separation anxiety. This particular presentation had a huge piece on separation anxiety. I did take it out because I thought it was a little bit much. Laura, if you want to speak to the point of how many calls, or if you get a lot of calls in regards to separation anxiety.
Yeah, I think the point should be made that separation anxiety isn't something that can be cured over the phone. If it's
Right.
real separation anxiety, they need, a qualified trainer to come in and help them with it. And the calls that I believe that I've received have been more that somebody adopts a new dog or a new puppy, and they've taken the week off or 2 weeks off. They haven't left the dog or the puppy alone at all until they go to work for, 8 hours or something. And of course, the dog is freaking out or anxious, upset that their human has left them, that's been with them 24 hours a day for the last 2 weeks, and they don't know what to do with themselves. So they're anxious, they're barking. That's the kind of calls I think that we've been getting.
Okay, I appreciate you saying all that, because separation anxiety has gotten so overused and watered down.
Yes.
To the point where I don't even like saying the words anymore, because people are self-diagnosing their animals with a diagnosis that is a true diagnosis that veterinary behaviorists and behaviorists will use, that is a true diagnosis, okay? And what happens is, the more people, the general public, are just using it and throwing it out there, way more confusing than anything. Right. Because a true separation anxiety case looks very different than what Laura just described. So I will always say, you say your dog shows or has separation anxiety. What does that look like? You want to know exactly what they're doing and when, in order to be able to differentiate between it. And then you will know for sure if they need to be forwarded to myself or Laura, or if it's something that you can help with. So the example that Laura just gave is a perfect example of a misdiagnosis and a self-diagnosis of somebody that's not qualified to diagnose that problem. So separation anxiety as a diagnosis is distress response to separation from the person to whom the dog is attached. Usually manifests as vocalizations, elimination, and or destruction, and may also have symptoms of behavioral depression, immobility, anorexia, lack of play, and just overall stress. Okay, so that's the true separation anxiety. Sorry, go ahead.
No. My apologies. And, Lainey and I have heard of cases in the dog training community where dogs have flung themselves out of second-story windows or eaten through actual wooden doors and walls and, hurt themselves to get out of their houses. So that's separation anxiety, not a puppy that barks because their owner left. That's just some anxiety. Needs to learn how to be alone.
Exactly. And that's treatable. Okay. I'm not saying that the one that, the dog that's jumping out the window is not treatable, but it's way harder to treat and must be treated by a professional.
Right.
The puppy that was just left alone after being with the owner for the past 2 weeks, every single day, 24/7, that's treatable. That's something where it can be a learned behavior for a puppy that needs to learn to be left alone. Okay. So just wanted to be very clear about that. So just again, going on the actual, now this particular PowerPoint was written by a veterinary behaviorist, so she was able to go through a lot of the different true separation anxiety symptoms, I guess. So typically occurs in the owner's absence. There's vocalization, elimination, destruction, anorexia, overactivity. So that means they're way overexcited and they're constantly moving and there's a lot of stress. Psychosomatic behaviors, prolonged owner contact, so they won't leave their side. And then if they recently were boarded, sometimes that happens too. Again, we've gone over this. I'm skipping it. Okay, so the treatable that you guys can give advice for is going to be the puppy that had spent 2 weeks with, or the dog, newly adopted dog, just spent 2 weeks with their owner 24/7, and then all of a sudden the owner has to go back to work and they're not liking being alone. Some of the different things that you would suggest would be to, teach the dog to separate from the owner, practice sit stays and down stays, and then start walking away. Slowly increase the time that they're away from the owner. And the goal would be that you're decreasing the following behaviors and increasing the ability to stay in the room without the owner. Okay. I just want to go back to that for a second. So I think hopefully what we've just talked about with separation anxiety versus a dog that just doesn't like to be left alone, you're able to differentiate between the two. I guess, Laura, if you have any off the top of your head, some suggestions of what, in addition, what you would give to a person that did just adopt that dog, or the dog is showing signs that they just can't be left alone.
It's almost like if you can catch the person soon after they've adopted and brought a new dog or puppy into their house, would be, if you are planning on taking the week off, wonderful, but make sure you leave to go out and get a cup of coffee. Make sure you leave to run a quick errand. So you're teaching your dog that brief absences, you're returning. So that would be, one thing. And even working on that, the weekend before they go back to work, if they've seen some signs, and increase time away, making sure the dog has something to do when they leave. That special Kong or that special food puzzle that, okay, this is the only time you get it is when I leave the house.
Yeah.
Chicken, peanut butter, something really, really good. So the dog has something to keep them busy, distract them, something to look forward to.
Also, exercise. So, exercise is really important, especially in the morning, before the owner is gone for the 8-hour day, to make sure that they've gotten a nice long walk, or at least a play session in the backyard or in the house. I guess the other question would be, because the helpline calls are going to be the ones that have not prepared and they've left their dog for the 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden that day one, they're calling and being like, so I left my dog today and he barked for, the whole 8 hours, right? Those are the calls you're going to get. And so the most important suggestions that you can give are the following, which Laura just went over, was giving the Kong before you leave. Exercise. Let's start with exercise first. So make sure, yes, you do have to get up an extra half an hour to an hour before you go to work and exercise your new dog. Either it's playtime inside, a nice walk outside, or both. Also, the Kong or the bones, making sure they have enough of those to keep them occupied for the day. You would want to, make sure a dog walker comes in the middle of the day so you can break up the 8 hours. Excuse me. So that's going to be really important too, to think about that. And then also, when you do get home, yes, you'll tell the person to go get the dog to bring them out to go to the bathroom, but there's not this big, pomp and circumstance when you walk in the door. It's not like, oh my God, I missed you so much. It's very cool, calm, collected. You just go in, bring the dog out to go to the bathroom, and then go on your merry way. You want to make sure that we're not, again, reinforcing that excitable behavior when you do show yourself again after a long day. Keeping that energy level as cool, calm, collected as possible is really, really important.
And,
So sorry, I was just going to say, I don't have these on the slide, so just make sure, you guys are taking some pretty good notes. And those that are listening to the recording, definitely rewind to reiterate some of it too.
And one other thing I was thinking that change up the owner's morning routine. Dogs know, okay, they grab their backpack, they grab their keys, they're putting on their coat, they're leaving me forever. Change up the morning routine. The owner's morning routine, that could help.
Yeah, I think that's all of those are really, really, really important, and you're able to do that. And these might be the calls that you'll keep in touch with the people that have called, just to make sure, like, how did today go? Did Fido still do A, B, and C? Okay, what did you make changes for? So those might be the calls that you'll sort of keep track of, and you might speak to them more than just once. And again, all else fails, definitely refer them to us. Okay, moving right along. Play aggression in dogs, nipping and rough play. I'm sure all of you guys have experienced a jumpy, mouthy dog at the Animal Rescue League of Boston. Raise your hand if you have. I definitely have. Play aggression in dogs. Okay, so it occurs in puppies and dogs that will use their mouth to play. Now, dogs in general use their mouths to experience their world. It's the only thing they kind of have. I mean, they have their paws too, but their mouths are just so much more fun to put on things. It occurs when dogs get excited and aroused during play, and they begin to jump up, and it's hard to get them to calm down. Jumping up can also occur when greeting strangers. So a little bit going back to what I said about those cheerful greetings, one thing that's always going to elicit some nipping and rough play is if your dog starts jumping on you. Like, the jumping really creates that excitement in the dog, and they start to amp up. And the more they amp up, the more they're able to amp up, the more they're going to be so overly excited that they'll start using their mouth. If they were playing with another dog, dogs play with their mouths. What we need to do is be the ones to teach the dogs that having their mouth on us is not acceptable. They can play that way with the dogs, but they can't play that way with us. So one thing that's really important to think of, again, is sort of going back to how dogs learn. If dogs learn to do what gets them what they want, and they're jumping on us and we're telling them to no, don't, stop, we've been reinforcing the behavior by talking to them, by making eye contact, and by touching them, because they don't know what the words no, don't, stop mean. They just see that we're interacting with them. So instead, what you want to do is then ignore that. So they jump up on you, you literally turn around and turn your back on them. That will then pass that message along that you're not getting into that. You're not doing that with them. Therefore, we're hoping that their energy level and excitement will start to go down because we're just not interacting and we're not giving into that type of rough play. Some people will say, oh, well, what if the dog is just incessant or following us and won't leave us alone? You could run away if you had to. But you always will use your food if you do have it. You can toss it on the ground so that their face is planted into the ground, getting the treats. And it gives you a minute to sort of regroup yourself and get yourself back into place so that you're not falling over. And then you can sort of reset. So then you can say, okay, I'm going to pay attention to you when you're sitting, but the minute you start jumping on me, I'm going to ignore. Laura, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, here's some solutions. Always use toys when playing with your dog, never your hands. So you want to, again, be prepared, right? So we're always being proactive versus reactive. If the dog nips at your hand, say ouch or ow, like really sharp and loud, and then turn away and ignore your dog. Some people could argue and say, well, aren't you, reinforcing it by doing that ouch? Not necessarily. It depends. You might even just do the ouch because it really hurt. But the other thing is dogs will interact that way, and they teach each other. If one dog bites too hard and it makes the other dog yelp, that yelp will communicate to the other dog, oops, that was a little bit too hard. So it helps them to learn what's called a bite inhibition. It teaches them that, oh, that was too hard, but this is not too hard, so I can keep doing this. But with us, we want them to know that it's just not acceptable at all. But again, if I start to say, no, don't stop and keep at it, they're just going to think we're playing. So reading that sentence again, if dog nips at your hand, say, ow, and then turn away and ignore your dog. When your dog is calm, try playing again. I think I just woke the cat up that's sitting next to me. If dog jumps up, turn your back on the dog while saying off. I would not do that. But when all four paws are on the floor, you would wait another 5 to 10 seconds and give a treat. I don't even ask them to sit. I just work on just if their feet are on the floor and they can do it for 5 seconds, I'll pay them for that. If they start jumping again, turn away again. At first, okay, so they might understand the idea of, okay, I don't jump on you the first minute I see you, but if you start petting me and then you stop, now I can't help myself. I just need to jump up on you. You're going to do the same thing. So if you're petting the dog and it gets them excited and you stop petting them and they try to jump up for more, you're just going back to the beginning and just, ignoring them, don't touch them again, that sort of thing. They have to earn their petting, which means that if they're jumping all over the place, you don't interact. But if they're sitting calm, cool, collected, you might pet them and touch them, talk to them, touch them, and make eye contact. And then just be consistent. Give the dog plenty of exercise, which is very, very important with playtime. Chew toys, because you might need a break. And then you could play controlled tug. And, it's something that they might be able to do. Okay. Destruction. Okay. Again, puppy proof, being proactive. You always want to be able to be proactive. So, oh my God, my dog keeps chewing all of my socks or keeps grabbing my shoes. Okay. Here's the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to get rid of everything. Pick everything up. Like, yes, you have to pick up all that stuff. Because again, nothing is innate in dogs. They're not just going to know that their toys are their toys and these shoes are off limits. They're not going to know it. They have to be taught. So you're going to puppy proof your home, cover the garbage cans or get them out of the room. Don't leave your shoes lying around, so on and so forth. Always give appropriate chew toys to teach the acceptable things to chew on. Pressed rawhides maybe, but usually those new, bully sticks are the new big things. Yeah. You're not going to give the old off-limit items. So like an old shoe, just leave them off limit for now. In puppy class or in dog training class, they might learn the leave it command or drop command, in which case you might sort of practice with some of those old shoes. But for right now, when you're giving people advice, just puppy proof your home. Get rid of everything. Always supervise them. And if they're not supervised, they're going to be in a crate or use baby gates. And then ensure enough physical activity and play. As always, be proactive. So you want to be sure that your dog is tired, because a tired dog is definitely a well-behaved dog. And don't punish. You could use the bitter apple on some things that you may not be able to get out of the room. Like some dogs might bite on the cabinet doors or something like that in the kitchen. If he has something he shouldn't, make a loud noise and give an appropriate chew toy, or you can always trade for a treat.
Yeah, I don't like that make a loud noise. I would rather have a treat, put it in front of their nose, and then they drop whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to keep that positive because you don't want them to, say, ingest whatever it is or learn that they need to keep it away from you because you're going to take it away.
Yeah,
making it positive rather than a negative thing.
Right. So don't be confused, however. Like, I don't want it to be that every time the dog gets something that they're not supposed to have, I all of a sudden come out with the cheese. Because what are we reinforcing then? What we want to communicate with these people that are calling on the phone is we want to say, first line of defense is puppy proof. Get everything out of the way. If your dog happens to have something they're not supposed to have, because for some reason, somehow, some whatever, then you'll get the treat, trade for it, and it's a done deal. Making the loud noise, yeah, you can just ignore that. But the trading for a treat definitely helps. But again, your first line of defense is always to just keep everything out of the way. All right. Is that it? Oh my God, that's it. We made it. Okay. I feel like there's so much more we could talk about.
There really is, but in reality, yeah.
But I feel like so unfinished, but I think this is good for now. Right? Do you think that we hit all of the...
Yeah, the big items, so, the other volunteers will have some ideas on how to deal with the callers. Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. All right. So this is good for now. I will put an end page to this because it's so, again, that's probably why I feel so like unfinished, because I don't have another slide after this. Any questions from those that are actually here? And thank you again for everybody sitting through it. I really appreciate it. So feel free to unmute yourself or write in the chat what your questions might be. We do have a good few minutes here. I'm going back to the beginning. The disobedience, I meant to take that out. I don't know what that means. Let's see. We did separation anxiety / doesn't like to be left alone. Play aggression, which is the jumpy, mouthy-ish type excitement. Destruction, ignored disobedience, the fearful dog, house soiling, barking. Dog-dog interactions. I mean, there's so much more. Like, we haven't even talked about loose leash walking, and I don't know. Do you ever get any of those calls?
No, not really. Not loose leash walking, no.
Okay. No questions, it sounds. All right. Well, that was quick and painless. Oh, hold on. Oh, we have a question. Yay. Okay. Oh, yes. Thank you, Denise. During these conversations, can we bring up the do not use the retractable leash? That's actually a really good point.
Yes.
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 The answer to that is yes. But we have to have a valid reason why. And everybody might have a different reason. But my huge reason, or it may all be the same, my huge reason is they're extremely dangerous because they just give the dog way too much room, and people tend to get distracted too. And if they are not paying attention and their dog is way far out, I don't even know how many feet those retractable leashes go, but if they're way far out and something happens and they then are like, oh my gosh, the dog is way too far away from them to have any ounce of control. So now they're just floundering and the dog is so far ahead. So many bad things can happen. I mean, it's practically like having a dog off leash, but then not, because they're still on leash. I've seen so many different, or I've heard of different cases of dogs getting hit by cars, of dogs getting attacked by other animals and dogs. I mean, the list goes on. So Denise just said that she knows of an older man that got dragged because the dog got a running start. I mean, there's just so many different things, so many different bad things that have happened with retractable leashes. Laura, maybe you have a little bit more of a, I don't know. I just don't.
Right. No, I don't like them either. And just, one day walking home from work in my neighborhood, a mother and her daughter and their little white fluffy dog on a retractable leash, and the daughter was walking the dog. The daughter dropped the handle. The poor little dog took off and is running down the sidewalk trying to get away from this scary thing that's bumping along behind it.
Oh my God, the poor thing.
So think of it that way, especially if it's a newer dog or a fearful dog.
Yeah.
And that handle is bumping along behind it. They're scared to death and they can't get away from it. It's total panic.
Yeah, that too is, oh my God, it's so scary. Yeah. They can wear out in the covered. Yeah, they can wear out for sure. In the covered area. So in that handle area, they can wear out and nobody even knows. The dog takes one good pull and all of a sudden it snaps. Okay, Kristen has another question too. Any advice on resource guarding, or is that just a refer situation? That is a refer situation, definitely. Yep, that's across the board. My dog is growling when I try to take a bone away from him or a toy. That's definitely right over to us for sure. To talk a little bit about I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but to talk for a second about, like we say, no retractable leashes. I am also vehemently against any kind of punitive type training techniques, such as the prong collar, the electronic collar. And I specifically am against these because, now some people might argue because the prong collar has helped my big, huge Mastiff walk down the street and I could walk him down the street. My response to that is yes. However, what happens with some of these collars is that, don't forget, when dogs are, how do I explain it? When a dog is exposed to something and they see what it is that they're exposed to. So if they're looking at another dog, looking at a person, looking at a child, and they're doing the normal dog thing, such as pulling towards that dog, child, or person, and every single time that they pull towards that as a normal dog behavior is they pull, every single time they pull towards that particular stimulus, they get a pain in their neck or they get shocked, they will build that negative association and say, every time I see that dog, this thing happens. And I have no idea why, but they immediately make that connection. And guess what happens? They get really mad. So we think, or the person thinks, well, I'm just stopping him from pulling. The dog does not realize that the reason the pain is happening is because he's pulling. He thinks that the pain is happening because he sees that other stimulus. So what ends up happening is the minute that he gets a hold of that stimulus, the aggression shows, because he's been so frustrated by getting hurt every time he sees that stimulus. Now he's like, you know what? I'm right here. You are going to get it, because it's frustration. Dogs build frustration. I call it leakage aggression. It means that the aggression doesn't happen today or tomorrow. It happens 2 years from now, where all of a sudden my dog has just started being aggressive towards other dogs. I don't understand. That's what I call leakage aggression. And that's what those types of training techniques cause, because dogs will associate that pain towards what it is that they're seeing, as opposed to using food or, positive reinforcement. Now they see that person, they pull towards it, and I turn around in the other direction. And then when the dog stops pulling or the dog's leash is loose, I then feed. There's nothing negative about that except that he didn't get to go pull over towards that thing. There's no pain. And then all of a sudden we're paying at the right time, meaning when the leash is loose, they get a nice treat. Hopefully that makes sense. But the idea is that, you know, we are all about the positive reinforcement reward-based training techniques for many reasons, but that being one of them. Laura, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I was just thinking how you had given Mastiff as an example and how we've taught in class, you know, Mastiff, how to loose leash walk. So it's, you know, big Great Danes come to class and learn how to walk nicely on a leash. German Shepherds, big, huge pulley pit bulls, they can all learn to walk nicely on a leash without pain.
Right, right. So that's sort of a little bit of a soapbox, but I at least wanted to say that about the canine, on this canine training, because there's a lot of misnomers out there about how it's so great, how some training is so great and others. And, you know, you'll see a lot of German Shepherd people using the techniques because they're shepherds, right? They're, you know, they should be trained that way, and that's not necessarily true. So, you know, if you get those sort of questions and you have your own opinions, definitely, you know, let us know. If you have thoughts and questions about it, definitely let me know. But across the board, I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page with that, and that we're not suggesting any of those, you know, punitive, old-fashioned training techniques. Any last words, Laura?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, great. Any other questions before we finish up? Oh, sorry, Kristen, did I miss one of your questions? Do you have any resources for dogs like you had for cats and small? Yes, I have, oh my gosh, a plethora of resources, which I will get to you. And that's probably one of the slides that I was probably missing, so I apologize for that. So I will get that to you guys as well. All right. Awesome, guys. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate you being here at this early hour of 4:30. And to those that are listening, thank you again for tuning in. And I look forward in the next 2 weeks. So now this 2 weeks is going to be all dog related. So anything dog. So what you'll want to do is I will send you the resources, but to get really fully involved in the dog part, you know, go onto YouTube, start looking at some canine body language videos and the trainers just in general that I want you to look at is, oh my God, Lucky Dog. Brandon McMillan has a great show out there. It's called Lucky Dog. It's on WBZ TV or CBS on Saturday mornings, but you can also download his the episodes on the CBS.com app. Those are great episodes for positive reinforcement training. There's so many positive reinforcement training trainers out there. Karen Pryor created clicker training. She's definitely one to follow. Look at some of the books by Jean Donaldson. There's just so much out there for positive reinforcement reward-based training. So definitely do some Google searching on that, but I will also, you know, have a list of resources for you. But involve yourself in all kinds of dog stuff the next 2 weeks, and then we will meet again in 2 weeks about just sort of going through a question and answer. We will tighten up any loose ends that we have, and then we'll also do some role play. And then I probably will have one more session in the evening when everybody can be live. So we'll start planning for that as well, so that we can get everybody here live, probably within the next 3 to 4 weeks before we actually go up live with the new helpline. All right, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Any questions, let me know. And thank you, Laura.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, good night.
Good night.